vessel of fortune for the Lord Jesus Christ, sailing the seas of culture, a real heist. Come along for a view that's unique and so true, an adventure with Rick, a Privateer's crew.
Hello, Levitical Kingdom Privateers, and welcome to the latest installation of your self-governing process. So, we just came off of getting, or no two ships are the same, right? Not all ships are the same. And we're walking in now to talking specifically about the old ship. This is the one that was commissioned by Babylon at your birth, when your mother served as an informant and registered your birth. In that moment, they created an entity. The entity is represented by an all capital letter name most of the time. I have seen where sometimes it's upper lowercase, but it still represents an estate and it represents a trust. And in this case, rather than focusing on the estate and the trust, we're going to look at it as a vessel. Because if you look at it this way, you can see the games that are being played. So let's just call this docking the old ship, obligations, expectations, and presumptions. Okay? That is what Babylon has taken hold of, has captured through this process. So what we're going to do today is talk about docking the old ship, the one that was created for you to do commerce on behalf of the state in which you were birthed. And we're going to talk about docking that ship, and we're going to talk about all of the nuances of that ship. We're not going to really talk about the new ship yet. We're going to get to that in coming episodes. But today we're going to talk about the old ship and how to lay claim to it, how to dock it, how to make it so that you no longer have to use it. And although that's the name of this episode, we're not going to talk about so much how not to use it, but I'm going to expose the problem with using the old ship. So this is why we need to dock the old ship. The fact is that the old ship is a key element of discerning the granddad of all conspiracies. Fact of the matter is, conspiracies exist. They've existed since the beginning of time. You have a serpent in the garden who is influencing the man and woman that God just made and put into the garden, and he conspired against God, against the man and the woman, in order to have them commit a transgression that they knew better than to commit. However, through a conspiracy, he was able to bring them to a place of desiring to have that particular thing that they were not supposed to have. Conspiracies have happened ever since then, and they will continue to happen really until the end of time. So we shouldn't be afraid to talk about conspiracies just because this concept of conspiracy theories has been thrust upon us by certain intelligence agencies that like to use that verbiage in order to cast dispersion upon people who literally have understood what is going on. And I don't want to get into side rabbit holes. I want to talk about the granddaddy of all conspiracies, and that is that the devil, in communicative form, because he's been because he's been given the opportunity to deceive the nations. He has been released in order to do so because he is out and about doing the task of deceiving the nations in order to make war against the kingdom. That is where that's going to be the basis of everything that I talk about today. So as I'm going through this, I need you to have a mindset that the entire purpose of this old ship is to convince you that you don't need God. You don't need his commission. You don't need his ship. You don't need his way, because a way has been created for you that you don't need God. In fact, a whole subset of law and presumption has been invented for you to use the old ship, in this case, ship Hidalgo for me. A whole subset of law has been invented in order for you to use this ship, which gives everything a good and bad tint. If you obey the law of this ship, you are good, and you will be given constant permission and upgrade to be able to do the things that this ship was designed to do, and that is commerce. It's all about interest. The interest of the United States, the interest of the country that you were born in, the state that you were born in, the province that you were born in. How can I say it in millions of ways there? Okay? So that's what it's about. Let nothing deceive you. This whole apparatus is because they want to convince you you don't need God. In fact, it's even worse than that. They are saying that they are God. And the science and the witchcraft that they have created in order to deceive you, in order to create a picture of something that looks legitimate, is actually a complete 1000% fiction and a falsehood. So I want you to understand that all of this has been captured. All commerce and interaction. So I want you to get that. It's not just the commerce has been captured, but even your interactions. Okay? If you look at that subset of law that has been established for the use of this ship, you will notice that it does not just govern commerce, it also governs your interactions. So if you have a problem with those who develop the laws that are replacing God, if you have a problem with those people, think about the things that people often do in order to try to remedy that situation. They protest, they gather in numbers, and they push against that system. Look at look at things like civil law. Look at things like civil rights. Look at things like voting rights. Look at those things which actually govern the interaction between us and that behemoth, this Babylonian system, who created this to replace God. There was a system in place before this that was well and good. It was completely natural, and it involved interaction between people. It involved commerce. It involved everything. But this took its place, and it took its place all at once. If you go back into the history of the world, and you begin to realize that somewhere around that into the 1700s and the beginning of the 1800s, there were wars taking place on all fronts against the old system, the old guard. This was put in its place. The beginning of the 1900s actually brought about a manifesto of sorts to implement this in every particular level. Think about the banking acts. Think about the Social Security acts. Think about the bank, the Federal Reserve. Think about all of the things that happened in the first quarter of the 1900s and how they were locking in those things that they had captured in the late 1700s and in the 1800s. They were locking those things in 100%. So keep that in mind as we go through this, because I want you to see how not only have they captured commerce, but they've categorized it into this thing called maritime or admiralty jurisdiction, and they have confused words so that you think you're talking about something that you're not talking about. Now, don't get too far in the weeds. When I say admiralty, when I say maritime, don't get into the courts are a ship and there's a bar and there's a, don't go that far. I want to take this to a surface level because I want you to understand that this is actually going on. I want to discuss two words that you think mean something that actually Babylon has completely contorted and means something else. If you go to an old dictionary, now I'm not talking about just legal dictionaries, I'm talking about old dictionaries, but specifically, more importantly, old legal dictionaries, you're going to find two words that have been completely captured: adventure and liberty. So anybody who understands biblical understanding knows that liberty is something that only comes by way of Christ. Christ is the author of liberty. He's the one who gives us liberty. Without Christ, there is no liberty. We know that, biblically speaking. However, Babylon has contorted that. And when they talk about liberty, that term liberty actually is a term meaning that time in between adventures, and I'll get to that in just a second, the time in between adventures where when you've docked your ship, when you've come to a place of in between commerce, okay, in between commerce, that time of interaction when you're getting off the ship, you've docked it and you've gone into port, and you can go and you can do as you wish to do, at the port and on the land. That is called liberty. That is literally what the term liberty means in the Babylonian system. It is that time of interaction between adventures. Okay? Now, adventure is another maritime term. If you go back to old dictionaries, it clearly defines it. An adventure is a commissioned event at sea. So if you're going to do a particular thing, let's say that you're going to Puerto Rico and you're going to collect sugar cane, and you're going to Cuba and you're going to pick up a bunch of sugar cane. That's your commissioned event. That's called an adventure. They would push off on an adventure to do this particular purpose. And in between those adventures, when they didn't have a particular commission, they would stop, they would go into port, and they would let everybody off at liberty. Okay? So those terms, liberty and adventure, do not mean what you think that they mean. So when Babylon uses the term liberty, and it's used quite often within constitutional wording, so on and so forth, what they're actually saying in Babylonian speak is that those times in between commerce, when you have time to yourself, we're going to govern those interactions too, and but you'll have liberty. You'll be able to go and do things that you like to do. You'll have hobbies, and you'll be able to hunt and fish and do these kind of things. But notice that even those interactions are greatly governed. And a lot of people are going to say, yeah, that's great, Rick. It's good that they're governed because of, if you put down too many animals, then you have short supply and so on and so forth. This myth of short supply is ridiculous. It's a myth. You understand that, right? You understand that there's more water underneath us than any of us could ever use. There's this grand conspiracy theory, right now talking about the data centers and the use of water and how, cities are going to run out of water. They're not going to run out of water if we're not using what we have at our disposal. Do we have to go deeper? Well, yeah, in a lot of places you have to go deeper, but there is plenty of water. Okay? Water is not something that's a limited resource on this earth. So let's get away from that right now. But my point in saying this is, this idea that resources are limited, that we live on this earth that has limited resources, and that we're all fighting for those resources, and if we don't manage those resources from a macro governmental level, that we're going to run out of resources, and then we're going to our children are going to suffer for it. Stop it. Stop it. Stop it. Stop it. The reason why they govern those interactions isn't because they're limited resources. It's because they're governing your interactions. They are trying to be your God. They're trying to tell you what you can and cannot do, even in your times of liberty. Hey, you want to fish? Great. Get a license. We'll tell you how many fish you can catch. Really? How's that liberty? That's not liberty. It's never been the concept of liberty, but they're even governing your liberty. Why? Because you need a God. And because you don't serve the one true God in his true way, this is what they're giving you. Okay? So think about it in that context as I go through this. So, let's get into the concept of authentication. And the reason I started off with that whole preamble of information is because you have to understand that before you understand authentication. Now, I want to be really clear. The only level of Babylonian governance that still calls it authentication is the federal level. If you go online and you Google right now authentication services, it's going to land you at the Department of State for the federal level, one of the departments within the Department of State. That's where it's going to take you, because that term still exists at that level. So part of the deception that's going on even now within that realm is that if you use the term authentication at the state level, many of the states don't use that language. They are adapting to using the language of the captured, and the captured is apostille. Okay, so a lot of states are utilizing the term certified, apostille, these kind of things in order to represent the concept of authentication. So do not get confused. But what authentication is a transfer of custodia legis. Now that's a Latin term, but it's pretty plain, and you can make it out if you listen to what I said. Custodia legis. So it's legal custody. The legal custody of the entity that was created at your birth, B-E-R-T-H, when you're talking ships. When you were birthed, what happened is they created a legal entity, and they hold the possession of custodia legis. Now, you may have heard the term, possession is 9/10 of the law. It's actually a fact. If you possess the custody of something, you possess 9/10 of it. Now, there is another tenth, and we're going to get to that. But the custodia legis transfer, the transfer of your legal custody from the state to you, is what authentication is really all about. Hello, Levitical Kingdom Privateers. I need your help. I'm creating a TV series for Rumble about a self-governing family that discovers the systems of the world are conspiring to capture all mankind into a war against the kingdom of Jesus Christ. The immaculate photorealistic pictures I'm showing you are storyboards for this exciting story that I'm writing and directing. Today, there are opportunities through artificial intelligence to shave millions off of movie budgets. A creative team can create awesome theatrical content for nickels on the dollar. With your help, my team can develop content that can teach and inspire people to come out of Babylon. Go and buy me a coffee today to help support my studio. Thanks. It is a transfer of legal custody. And once you have legal custody, 9/10 of the law is on your side. Now, what law am I talking about? Not God's law, Babylon's law. Okay? 9/10 of Babylon's law is on your side. Now, there's nuances to that, and I'm going to talk about that in future episodes as we talk about kind of the ins and outs of, how trouble is made, so on and so forth. But the second thing that authentication does is give you the right to dispose. This ship that you're trying to dock, see, Babylon really doesn't want you to dock that ship. They want you to continue using that ship because that ship is numbered. It's called a Social Security number, and that ship is numbered. And as long as you use this ship, they can track it. It's like a GPS, right? They can track every penny that you make. They can track every transaction that you make. They can basically come down on you when you make a wrong purchase. They can, whatever. Okay, they can call some of your purchases fraud. Okay, they can do all the things that Babylon loves to do. They can blame you for structuring because you took out $999, 3 times out of your bank account. They can do all those things because they really don't want you to dispose of this ship. Okay, they've created a system that keeps you compelled to utilize this ship. But you have the right, once you have transferred that custodia legis through authentication, you have the right, and I'm not talking about just Babylonian, but even biblically, you have the right to be able to dispose of this ship. Now, what does dispose mean? Does it mean I'm going to destroy the ship or sell the ship? No. You can't ever dispose or sell the ship because there is wealth associated with that ship. Now, we're not going to talk about that wealth because I don't think it's a legitimate conversation anymore. I think the legitimate conversation is what to do with this old ship. So you're going to have the right, once you've authenticated, to dispose of this ship. You can park it and use something else in order to present yourself as something else, something that's abiding by a different set of law. Thirdly, it is a counter deed. Okay, now I know counter deed is B here, but I added something in my notes, and this is something I wrote before. But it's a counter deed. Now, a counter deed is very special. I want you to pause this video, go to Google or your favorite search engine and type in define counter deed. And it's going to come up with the definition of counter deed, and you're going to be shocked. You're going to be like, wow, I didn't know that was possible. You mean I can obliterate, whatever that word is, I can destroy the public deed and and actually replace it with a secret deed that I've sealed myself, that I can, that's either notarized or sealed, yeah, you can. And that's actually what you're doing when you authenticate. You're actually creating the beginnings of what is a counter deed. You are taking away the public deed, the legal custody that they have over that public deed, and you are making it a secret deed by bringing it in to your house. Now remember, we talked about in getting ship shape the concept of establishing your house. If you don't have a house, you have nothing to put this in. And if you have nothing to put this in, you're at a great disadvantage. So all of this works together. All of it works together. But that's what a counter deed is. It is destroying the public deed and bringing that deed into secret or private, where you're going to control it. All right? That's what authentication does. Also, a fourth thing that also I wrote down in a different way, but I'll explain, is declaration of annexation. What you're doing when you take that deed, which represents title, it represents title to something that is important. You are annexing it to your kingdom. An annexation is where you conquered another territory and you brought your governance into that territory, which is something that you're capable of doing. And in fact, when you read the language on the face of the federal authentication, which is the riveted top sheet on your authentication process, which we'll talk about shortly, when you look at that and you read it, it actually tells you that you are annexing that document. It tells you that you're annexing. So I want you to understand, you are actually now able to subjugate that document and bring it under the terms and conditions of your house. That's important. Now, is it going to be easy? Is it come without presumption? No. They have this eternal presumption that because you live and exist or are resident in a particular area or a citizen of a particular country, they have this presumption that you're forever attached. The truth is, you're not. The scriptures say, the old is gone, the new has come. You're not attached. But that's part of that grand conspiracy that I was talking about. So why did I say declaration of testament? Because what you're doing is creating a testament of that annexation. And you're putting it on top of the authentication papers. You're going to paperclip it on top along with the definition of counter deed, because that's very important. You're actually doing a counter deed when you do this process. And then the last thing that I have is established baptismal statement. Now, why, Rick, is it important to have an established baptismal statement as part of the authentication process? Well, I just alluded to the fact that they have eternal presumptions on you. They have eternal presumptions on this ship. They have eternal presumptions on things. I coined a phrase some time ago called Babylonian presumptivism. And that is exactly what Babylon does. It presumes everything. It doesn't act upon right, guarantee. It doesn't act upon those things. It acts upon presumption all the time. Because you participate, they presume. Okay. So what we're going to do is we're going to have to show in our documentation that the old is gone and the new is come. Now, how do you do that? Baptism. You need an established baptismal statement. Now, what do I mean by established? The scriptures say to establish a matter at 2 or 3 witnesses. So if you have a baptismal statement that has been witnessed by 2 or 3 witnesses, you have an established baptismal statement. That, attached by paperclip to your authentication with a counter deed on top, a declaration of annexation above that, and a established baptismal statement on top of that, cannot be overcome. It cannot be overcome, especially once that's the basis of you building out your house. I'm telling you, this is key. So let's get into the actual creation of the authentication itself. What you have to do is go to the governing body in the state that you were born in that handles birth certificates. Sometimes it's the health department, sometimes it's the State Department. I mean, every state does things weird and different. So you have to figure out how to get that in your state or the state that you were born in and get certified, long form, certified copies of your birth record. Sometimes it's called a certificate of live birth. Sometimes they have other names for it, but ask for the long form that has the most information on it possible. Okay, ask for the long form and get 2 or 3 copies of that, certified copies of that. Once you have that in your hand, you're going to want to get that document authenticated. And again, remember, they don't really call it authenticated at the local level anymore. At the state in which you were born. Now, here's what you do. You go and you find out what division of your state does apostilles. Because they still call apostilles, and this is apostille's brother, okay? The only difference between an apostille and an authentication from a literal jurisdictional definition is that a apostille is done through the Hague Convention and the treaties which exist from the Hague Convention, and the authentication process is done through a non-Hague relative country. Now, non-Hague countries are really, really rare, and I would personally advise you to use Taiwan. Taiwan is the playground of the elites, even though there's all the time being threats upon it that it's going to be subjugated to the Hague. It never is, and probably will never be. Am I going to say that guaranteed? No. But right now it is, and as long as you get it done before any changes happen, if they happen, then you're good. Because even if they change it after the fact, you've still got an authentication, because the process is what defines the authentication. So use Taiwan and tell them that you want tell the state that you were born in, whatever division does apostilles, that you want your birth certificate certified for Taiwan. And they may ask you for a reason. If they ask you for a reason, tell them legal reasons. Very simple. If they have, if it's even more technical than that, tell them adoption. Okay, because that's actually the treaty that we're involved in, is the adoption treaty. It's very important. That's how you would answer that legal question if it came to you. So take your certified birth certificates, send it along with a letter stating that you want it certified for Taiwan, and they're gonna send you back a cover sheet that has the seal of the state on it and all kinds of information telling you what day that this was done and for what country it was done, and it's going to come back to you. Once you have that, now you're going to want to send it to the federal level. The federal level is going to have a particular form. It's called a DS 49 something or other. The way to find it is go to your favorite search engine and type in Department of State Authentication Division, and what's going to pop up is the link to their authentication department, and then you're going to take that address and you're going to take that form that shows up there and you're going to fill it out in accordance with the same information you did with the state, telling them that you want to do it, you want it done for Taiwan, and that you want, however many you want, and include the money in there for it. I think it's $20 a piece right now, so just include that money in there and get that done. And what you'll get back is a riveted 3-pager. The bottom page will be the birth certificate, the middle page will be the state, and the top page will be the federal. Now, if you want a video that's going to take you through this line by line, what to do, go to c2kreport.com. c2kreport.com, and go to the very top where the menu is and click authentication. There's going to be a video on that page that takes you exactly through everything I just told you with a fine-tooth comb. It's going to show you how to fill things out. I made that video quite some time ago. The forms may have changed slightly, but the information is the same. So check that video out, and just keep in mind, everything that we're doing it for the blood, right? That's my moniker, but we're doing it to dock the ship. That's what we're doing it for, is to dock this ship. Now, common questions that I get all the time is this going to make us a citizen of Taiwan? No. This is not a citizenship transfer. This is not an expatriation. This is just you stating that you want the style of Taiwan, and you have to pick a non-hate country. There's very few of them, and that's probably the safest one. Okay, so if you say Taiwan, you'll get the style of an authentication. It doesn't actually mean anything with Taiwan. Really doesn't. It's very important that you just set that up, do it exactly the way I describe it on the video, and you'll get back an authentication. It literally means nothing when it comes to your transactions, your business, your commerce, your interactions. It means nothing. It's just a style. You would get, if you went through a Hague country, you would get back an apostille, which would be a completely different style. It would actually be in Dutch, because the Hague is in the Netherlands, and the Netherlands speak Dutch. So you're going to get it back, this Dutch thing that's, it's going to look all, super foreign, and that's not what you want. That's not what you want. Authentication does not have, an apostille does not have the power that authentication has. These are the things authentication does. Apostilles do not do that. It's a declarative document within the Babylonian system. That's what an apostille is. Don't want that. You want this. So, with that said, this has been In with the Old, Out with the New. Wait, did I do that backwards? No, I didn't. It's literally into the dock with the old and out of the dock with the new. This has been a Privateer Volley. Hope you enjoyed it. Everything we do here at Privateer's Volley, it's all about the blood. See you next episode.
For joining our swashbuckling episode.